Parthene Vespina Achrandethe Otoi.
Saint Ephrem was born in Greece on September 14, 1384. His father died when he was young, and his mother was left to care for 7 children all by herself. At age 14, Ephrem went to a monastery near Makri. Here he took on his shoulders the cross of Christ and placed himself under the monastic discipline. In addition to this, he received the grace of the priesthood and served in the altar with great reverence. On September 14, 1425, the Turks came and destroyed the monastery and looted the surrounding area. However, during the invasion, Saint Ephrem remained calm, which infuriated the Turks, and so they imprisoned and tortured him in order to force him to deny Christ. They locked the saint in a small cell without food or water and tortured him, hoping that he would convert to Muslim. Several months later, on May 5, 1426, they decided to put him to death, and so they led him to a tree and tied him upside down and began to beat him. "Where is your God?" they asked, "and why doesn't he help you?" The saint did not lose courage, but prayed, "O God, do not listen to the words of these men, but may thy will be done as thou hast ordained." They continued to torture him until one of them took a flaming stick and plunged it violently into the saint's navel. Soon, the saint grew too weak to speak, and so he prayed silently, asking God to forgive his sins. Then he lapsed into unconsciousness. Thinking he was dead, the Turks cut the ropes and the saint's body fell to the ground, where they continued to beat him. Before his soul was released from his body, the martyr said, "Lord, I give up my spirit to thee." Nearly 500 years later, on January 3, 1950, Abbess Makaria was wandering through the ruins of the monastery looking for relics. She asked a worker to dig at a certain spot, which was where Saint Ephrem was buried. The abbess discovered the saint's head, robe, and bones, and so she decided to read the Vesper service to him. She then heard a voice saying, "How long are you going to leave me there?" Here she saw a tall monk with small round eyes, whose beard reached his chest. In his left hand was a bright light, and he gave a blessing with his right hand before disappearing. In the morning, after matins, Mother Makaria cleaned the bones and placed them in a niche in the altar area of the church, lighting a candle before them. That night, Saint Ephrem appeared to her in a dream. He thanked her for caring for his relics. Then he said, "My name is Saint Ephrem." Since Saint Ephrem glorified God in his life and by his death, the Lord granted him the grace of working miracles. Those who venerate his holy relics with faith and love have been healed of all kinds of illnesses and infirmities, and he is quick to answer the prayers of those who call upon him. Above is a picture of Saint Ephrem's monastery in Makri. In 2006, there lived an Athenian army officer by the name of Vassil who was an atheist and had no relationship with the church. One day, he entered his home and smelled a beautiful fragrance that reminded him of incense or myrrh, not knowing where it had come from. A few days later, he went to the doctor and had a series of tests done. His results showed that his liver was completely destroyed and his health was becoming worse. After hearing the news, Vassil decided to go to the monastery of St. Ephrem. Along the way, he stopped at a gas station and saw a nun. He asked the nun for directions to the monastery since he was lost. The nun responded by saying, "I will not tell you where you can find the monastery of St. Ephrem. You will find it on your own. But I will tell you that for whoever he wants to help and protect, he will allow himself to be smelled." When he arrived at the monastery and saw a picture of the founder and Abbess Makaria, who had reposed 7 years earlier, he immediately identified her as the nun he had seen at the gas station. He then stood before the relics of St. Ephrem and became emotional, falling to his knees and crying as he made the first confession of his life to St. Ephrem. Meanwhile, the hospital called Vassil to return to the hospital for a biopsy. His number soon dropped dramatically, and he was eager to return to the monastery to thank St. Ephrem for healing him. He went home for a few days after leaving the hospital to rest before going to the monastery. Suddenly, he noticed several bruises on his body and returned to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with a blood disease and was told he had to undergo a rigorous form of therapy. He then returned to the monastery to ask St. Ephrem for forgiveness for not coming back sooner to thank him. Vassil spent a lot of time praying and asking St. Ephrem to heal him while receiving medical treatment. Eventually, Vassil fell into a coma and the doctors claimed there was nothing else they could do. One night, Vassil was barely awake in the hospital and he smelled the special fragrance of incense or myrrh that he had smelled in his home several days earlier. His room suddenly became full of light, and he saw Saint Ephrem as he is depicted in his icons, standing over him. The saint did his cross 3 times and said to Vassil, "Now I will receive you." The next morning, he was out of his coma and back to his normal health. Vassil eventually got married at the monastery of Saint Ephrem in Makri, Greece, and baptized his oldest son there and gave him the name Ephraim. May Saint Ephrem of Makri continue to intercede for us all.